The great caves of South Sea were once the center of high society in the city. The skyscraping apartments were the jewels of the city's wealth in the early 80s. At the center of these great caves was the Golden Shell, the biggest casino of the South Sea. Celebrities and power were the norm of the casino. That is until the Great Fall. These caves aren't what they used to be. What was once a source of pride and riches of South Sea was now a constant reminder of what used to be. The apartments have long since been torn down, leaving in their place seemingly endless piles of rubble. The only building that survived was the once magnificent Golden Shell. No longer do celebrities flock to the great tables of the casino, but the Shell now holds a different source of power. The people of South Sea were vulnerable. Thousands lost their jobs, if not worse. It wasn't until a businessman moved into the Shell that things truly took a turn for the worse. This businessman successfully unified the seahorse gangs of the crustacean gang, forming an unstoppable force. All of a sudden, these desperate people were losing far more than their livelihood. The way of the businessman was simple: pay or die. Despite the power he had over the city, no one knew who he was or even what he looked like. To meet the businessman was to sign your own death certificate. Rumors spread that he didn't exist. It was then that he showed his true power. The neighboring town of Coral Dunes paid the price for this doubt. Some say you can still smell the fire that started small enough, but tore the city to shreds. The authorities have tried to stop his rise to power, but no normal police officer dares stand in the way of the businessman's path. That is until now. There is still one group crazy enough to take on the businessman. One group that laughs in the face of danger, and that lives so close to the edge that death would seem more of an adventure than a problem. The Aqua Cops. The Aqua Cops set up their operation across from the Shell in the Coral District. Not that the Coral District was any less of a danger, it just so happened that rent was cheap. The Aqua Cops didn't do their jobs for money. These were no mercenaries. The Aqua Cops had no choice but to serve and protect. And that to a man they all knew and accepted. Led by Captain Alphonse Killer Capinetti, the Aqua Cops ran their operation with swift justice. Captain Capinetti, a killer whale from the East District, had a less than typical background. After serving in the Great Sea Wars, he took up with a group of mercenaries. During this time, Killer, as he came to be known, did many things he wasn't proud of. Those times are now past him, and now he fights only for truth and justice. While the oldest member of Aqua Cops, don't be fooled. The nickname Killer is more than just a play on being a killer whale. The captain ran a tight ship, and it would be a grievous and dangerous mistake to think he had become soft. While the Aqua Cops were heralded throughout the city, it wasn't a large operation, just 4 men and the captain. Detective Mickey Pinchy McManus was the information man of the operation. After spending years undercover in the Blarney Reef, this crab had bigger ambitions, and it so happened an attitude to meet them. After successfully taking down the crew's crab syndicate, Pinchy was given the key to the city. He could have held down a desk and served his time until his pension with ease, but Pinchy never much liked being in the background, so he left his cushy position and joined up with Captain Capinetti. Eddie Boom Boom Kaczynski started his life as most electric eels do, in the Eel District of Champion City. Eddie had a normal upbringing for his type, private schools and good living. Finishing first in his class in electricity engineering, Eddie's future was bright. After taking a job working for a top engineering firm, Eddie was put on the fast track for CEO of the company. That is until the incident. Eddie had a family back in those days. That is until the businessman moved into town. Although the police called the incident an accident, this wasn't enough for him. He began his own form of justice, using his skills in a different way. Over a 1-month span, Eddie took to blowing up dozens of the businessman's establishments, a feat that would land him in prison. It was while in prison the captain heard about his crusade. He met with Eddie and offered him a job on one condition: that he keep his hatred for the businessman. Eddie had only one request for the captain: that he be allowed to blow up everything that the businessmen created. The captain agreed, and CEO Eddie Kaczynski became Boom Boom, explosive expert for the Aqua Cops. Bobby the Blaze Robinson had only one skill: speed. There wasn't a vehicle in the sea that Blaze couldn't drive, ride, fly, or paddle. Blaze had risen to the top of the underground racing circuit, and no Stingray had ever been as fast as Blaze. There's only one problem, though. Blaze didn't much care for being told what he could race. His whole life had to be fast. Still, Blaze raced. He always figured it was worth the cost if it would give him the funding for his more serious pursuits of building vehicles that would go faster. It was only a couple of years ago, but if you asked Blaze, he would say it was a lifetime ago when he worked for the businessman. You see, there was quite a racket in the underground races. A racket that was just too sweet for the businessman to pass up. The only problem with races is that Blaze never lost and made betting, or moreover, fixing these races near impossible. Impossible wasn't a word the businessman liked, especially when it came to money. He gave Blaze two options: start losing or start dying. These weren't options for Blaze. Doing one meant the other. So he went out in one last bid, winning the championship. Knowing that he signed his death warrant, he went into hiding as a cab driver in the Southern District. It was just a coincidence that the captain happened to recognize his cab driver one night. The captain offered Blaze something he had never been offered: to go fast on his own term. That is when Bobby the Blaze Robinson, former champion, stopped hiding and started fighting. Fighting for justice, offering his skills to the forces of good, and at all times going fast. The captain was the backbone of the operation, but Sharktapus was the steel. He had drifted through the city most of his life looking for a fight. Although when he fought with Sharktapus, it wasn't a fight as much as a beating. If there was ever a challenge, Sharktapus would end generally quicker than it had begun. The captain had seen Sharktapus in action. Everyone had. He became a local legend and a tale that mothers would tell their children to warn them. Be good or Sharktapus will get you. And it wasn't that Sharktapus particularly cared about good or bad. It just happened that most of the time only the bad would be stupid enough to fight. The captain convinced Sharktapus to join Aqua Cops with only one guarantee: he would provide him with the action he'd been searching for. The captain only one request for Sharktapus: only fight who I tell you. Sharktapus kept his promise as best he could, but to tame Sharktapus was like trying to swim against the current. It didn't happen. No one knew where Sharktapus came from. The captain used to joke that he came from hell, but they kicked him out because even the devil himself couldn't control him. It was a joke by the captain, but to a man it seemed like as good as an explanation as any. If Sharktapus was asked about it, he would only grin, showing off the teeth, and say, "I don't worry about where I come from. All I know is that when I go, I'm taking everybody with me." Sharktapus always had 8 answers to everything. His tentacles, and he didn't want to be on the receiving end after you asked the question.